Hello, welcome to the Heavenly Purpose Podcast. I'm your host, Amy. In this bilingual podcast, we will discuss overcoming struggle from a faith standpoint. If you feel lost, hopeless, or don't know how to begin your walk with Jesus, please stay to listen. This is the podcast for you.
Well, hey there. Thank you very much for tuning into the very first episode of the Heavenly Purpose podcast. It is an honor to be here. I am very, very humbled to have a platform where I can talk about how amazing God is, how amazing Jesus is. I decided to start this podcast because I have a very, very good story to tell you. I have a very big testimony. And throughout the episodes, not only will I be sharing my own testimony, but I will have other guests that have great testimonies to share. So my purpose here is really to glorify Jesus, to glorify his kingdom, to bring people closer to him, and to help anybody that wants to start their journey in Christianity and doesn't know how to. I think that sometimes, becoming a new Christian can be very overwhelming. But whenever you start hearing the stories of other people that did it, it becomes a little more encouraging to start, and it doesn't seem as heavy of a burden to carry. So without further ado, I am just going to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about my story. So my name is Amy. I was born and raised in Mexico, but I come from a family of immigrants that actually are from Nicaragua. When they were about 23, 22, and they started having kids of their own, they decided to leave the country because there was a civil war going on. A lot of my family members actually went to just several other countries. I have family in Spain, family in Canada, all throughout the US, in Mexico, in France, wherever they could land and wherever they could seek refuge. So it just happened to be that my family decided to go to Mexico. When I was growing up, I really didn't have a lot of family to surround myself with. Birthday parties, Christmas, those type of events were kind of always my parents, my siblings, and I didn't have much to share with other people. And to me, it just seemed like I was getting pushed to go and seek my own, if that makes any sense. Like I wanted to go out in the world and find myself. I started to take interest in languages. So English was one of the subjects that I really liked, and I started practicing it more. I started watching movies. I started watching shows like The Hills so that I could practice a little bit, and it was very beneficial. My parents were very, very hardworking, just making sure that I would have a very good education. They sent me to private school, but they were not able to send me abroad. It was my dream to go abroad and actually practice new languages. And, they did so much for me, and I didn't expect them to do any more than that. But I always wanted to go out and explore. By the time that I was 20, I finally found a program that was called au pair. An au pair is a mix between a live-in nanny and an exchange student. A family from the US will host somebody that is from anywhere in the world, Australia, Germany, France, Mexico, and they will have a live-in nanny that goes to school whenever they have a chance. So it's a really cool exchange program that I decided to take advantage of. And when I was 20, I arrived to the US. That was 2014. I was having the time of my life. I really was enjoying the exchange aspect of it. I was going to college. I was having a lot of fun meeting new people from all over the world, learning new languages. So that was very enjoyable. Later on, throughout my experience, I realized that I actually kind of wanted to stay to study a little longer. So I enrolled myself in school so that I would become a full-time student, and I switched my exchange visa for a student visa. And what happens when you do that is that you are granted a status to stay in the US, but they don't give you another visa in your passport, if that makes any sense. So you're not able to leave the country, really. I mean, you're able to leave, but you wouldn't be able to come back in. At the time that I was already studying, it had been about 2 years of me not being able to go back to see my family. I was very homesick. I was in a relationship with a person who I thought was amazing. It was like a dream come true. He was treating me so nicely. I was just head over heels for this guy. Just to connect the dots, my visa was not in my passport. I was very homesick and I was dating this guy. So, at the beginning of 2017, I decided that I would go back to Mexico to request the visa in my passport. And that way I would be able to come back and forth. Well, that did not go as planned. I went to Mexico, requested the visa, and it got denied. And it got denied because the lady that was in the consulate told me that I didn't want to study, but my GPS was 3.9. She didn't even look at my grades or anything like that. She just denied it. And I think that that was a blessing in disguise, actually. I spent about 11 months in Mexico, and the guy that I was dating actually proposed. So those 11 months that were spent in Mexico, I was waiting for a fiance visa. And while I was waiting for this fiance visa, I was working, making friends, just making sure that I would do something productive while I waited. And while I was waiting, I made a friend. She is an older lady, but she became kind of like my mom. The end of 2017 is when I come back to the States and I got married to the person that I told you about before. This guy in the past was very loving, very kind, very joyful to be around. And whenever I arrived, the situation got kind of different, to say the least. What I thought that was love was actually codependency. What I thought was being protective was actually a tactic to isolate me. Whenever I started going through the motions of being a married woman and having all of my family in Mexico, I started to realize that I was very lonely, and not only lonely, but actually alone. And that is because everybody that I knew, and everybody that I was friends with, and everybody that I would interact with was somehow connected to that person. They were somehow connected to my husband at the time, and he just started treating me like I was a piece of furniture. I started going to therapy, and connecting the dots, I found out that he was actually a narcissist. Mind you, I don't want to make this episode about him, but I do want to give you a clear vision of what it is that I was going through from 2017 to 2020. Say, for instance, narcissists do things like love bombing you. They are going to treat you very, very nice, especially through the very first stages of your relationship. Once they get a sense that they got you hooked, they are going to start mistreating you really bad. And what I mean by really bad is just crush your sense of self-worth in a way that you start to just questioning your reality. It got to a point with me where I couldn't go to the nail salon and choose a color for myself. I was very, very manipulated in most of the things that I was doing confidently in the past. I was questioning. And the way that you get to that place is they will start saying something like, "You see the light behind me. This is obviously a red light, but it has green dots." So they will say something like, "See this light? This light is green. It's totally green." And you will say, "No, it's red." You can see that it's red. "No, I'm telling you, you don't know nothing that you're talking about. You need to check your eyes. This light is actually green. It's completely green. You don't see it?" And they tell you this so much, so often, and so straightforward that you're like, you know what? I think that it actually is. Yeah, I do see the dots. So I can see where you're coming from. Like it is actually, yeah, it is a little green. So the way that they just switched your way of thought about that little thing, they do the same for everything else. Whenever I was about to get married, he would do things like go out with his friends and purposefully not tell me where he was going. But when I was going out, he would want to know my every move. So I would ask something like, "Hey, where are you going?" And he would say, "Oh my gosh, you never let me have fun. Like, I don't do you like this." And I would say, "I'm just trying to see where you're going. Like, it doesn't have to be so mysterious." And he would say, "Oh my gosh, here you go. You are crazy about that. I am not going to do anything. I'm just going to have fun with my friends." So it would end up being something that I would have to ask for forgiveness. I would be like, "Oh, well, I'm sorry that I'm asking you so many questions. I must be really difficult." When in fact, he was the one that was being sneaky for no reason, or maybe for a reason, who knows at this point. Other things that would happen would be I would, get ready to go to a certain event and I would show him my outfit. And he would start roasting each outfit. He would say, "Oh, you look like an upside down, I don't know, ice cream cone." Or he would be like, "You look like this, you look like that." And it would get to the point where he would start then saying mean things. So he would say, "Oh, you look like a clown. You look like a parrot. You look like this and that." And I would end up crying. At the end of these occurrences, I would think that I was really the problem, that I just couldn't dress, I just couldn't do anything good, wasn't enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I just wasn't what he deserved, according to him. And I was just buying those lies. And it didn't help that I didn't have any family in the country. I just couldn't go to my mom's house and say, "Hey, he did this to me." And another thing that you have to take in consideration with narcissists is they will act completely different when they are in front of people. The facade and the mask just comes on and off as soon as somebody is in the picture. In events, he would treat me like I was a queen. He would brag about me. He would say, "Oh my gosh, my wife is so beautiful and she does everything for me and I adore her so much and I love her." So it would be very confusing to me because as soon as we would go back in the house, I would be just a piece of furniture. Mind you, I was not able to connect this to or to correlate them to. I would just think that as soon as we got home, I did something that was bad enough to change his mood. So it was a very abusive cycle that I was in. And the way that I coped about it was by staying busy. I continued to go to school full time, and I had a job as a nanny where I was working for about 30 hours. And whenever I would get home, I would cook dinner and, clean the house, do homework. So I was so busy that I was kind of covering up for him not paying attention to his wife. I would make excuses for it. I would be picking up new hobbies or learning how to do this. I would say that I was a highly functioning wounded person. I truly found a way to make it work. And it was not because he was actually putting an effort, but it was because I knew that I had no way out, or that me getting out of that situation was going to be very, very difficult. So I had to make it work somehow. Well, that worked for a little bit until I started getting fed up. Whenever it got to the point where I started demanding that I was treated right, or that I was actually paid attention, or that he would show me love, it became a constant battle. And I was not so easily manipulated anymore, or I would give a fight for it. And it started irking him. It started being a little more difficult for him. So I would ask him for a divorce very, very often. And there was no peace at home whatsoever. Out of the 5 days of the week, 4 would have an argument of some sort. It didn't matter if it was an argument because he didn't wash the dishes, or he, I don't know, whatever the case may be, but there was no peace in that house. At the end of 2019, I was really getting fed up. I was really brokenhearted every day. I just couldn't take it anymore. I started to realize that what he was giving me was not love. It was just breadcrumbs. I started going to therapy. My therapist actually suggested that I would leave. She suggested that I would find a house to go to, a friend's house, and just stay over there for a weekend. So I started, getting like a little more courage to do things. And I started to speak out a little more every time that I felt like he was abusing me. And every time that things would get a little physical, it was not so much that I would be able to have evidence for the police. It would just be enough so that he wouldn't leave me bruised, if that makes any sense. So at the end of 2019, I decided to call the domestic violence hotline, because whenever you come to the US as a fiance or as a wife, they give you a little pamphlet that has information about domestic violence. And it says, if you are experiencing domestic violence, or you're a victim of sex trafficking, or so on and so forth, please call X, Y, and Z number. I decided to call that number. I told them what was happening. And the very thing that made my story so real was that every now and then he would threaten me about deporting me if I did something that he didn't like. Or he would say something like, if you cheat on me, I am going to deport you. If you leave me, I am going to deport you. If you do blah, 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 I am going to deport you. So that was what I said to the people that were on the other line. I said, he is telling me that he is going to deport me, and he is telling me that he cannot hit me or he cannot fight with me, but he has sisters that he can send to me. So I am very afraid. I have nowhere to go. I need help. And what they did was give me a list of resources that I could call. They gave me a shelter to call. They gave me legal services to call, and a place where they had therapists. Well, I just kept that in my pocket. I had all of the information, but I was not yet in a place where I felt confident to leave. Later on, in the beginning of 2020, I thought that I was ready to leave, so I actually went to a friend's house. But I was so codependent and I was so weak emotionally that I came back home after 2 days. And another reason why victims of domestic violence don't speak out is because we are ashamed, truly, truly ashamed. I would hear people saying things like, "Ooh, you're better than me. Because if I was you, I would have left already like 3 years ago. I would have broken up with him way before the marriage. I would have done this. I would have done that." And truth to be told, you can say all of those things until you're in a relationship like that. Once again, they twist your reality so much that you don't know what's real and what's not. You don't know what you're capable of, and you don't know what they are capable of. So it was a very unfortunate situation for me where I was very weak. I came back, and of course, that was an ego boost for him. He said, "Oh, well, you just came back because you cannot live without me. You cannot pay bills without me. I bet that your friend's house was ugly and you came back because this house is beautiful." Our house was okay, that to start with. But I said, no, I truly want to work this marriage out. Like, I got married for a reason, and I want to start finding ways to make this work. In my mind, ways to make that work was just to comply to everything that he said. But that was unrealistic and dysfunctional. So one of the things that I would do in my free time to keep myself occupied and not have to deal with him was dance lessons. I would go to a studio and we would go and take Zumba or take some type of, exercising situation with other females. One of the females that was there, I really liked, but I really never got in touch with her to the point where we would call each other friends. But one night she asked me to go out with her, and I went out, and I don't know what got in me that I was vulnerable enough to tell her, hey, I think that I am about to go to a shelter. I just cannot deal with this anymore. This is what's going on. My husband is like this to me, and he humiliates me, and he makes me feel like I'm stupid and like I have no place in this world unless it's through him. So she was like, to a shelter? Are you crazy? No, you're going to come and stay with us. Me and my husband have a spare bedroom. You can come and stay for as long as you want to. And I was like, no, 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 no. I cannot do that. That's too much, because that's very nice for about a week or so. But then I got to find something else. All of the contacts that I had received from the domestic violence hotline, I pulled them out and I started calling each and every one of them. I called a shelter. I told them what was going on, and they had a place for me, actually. They had a room, and they were able to take me. And I was about to go there, and something in me said, no, you're not ready. So I declined it and said, I think that I'm going to stay here. Mind you, it takes about 7 times for a victim of domestic abuse to leave. It takes a lot of effort. So I declined that. And my friend that had offered the spare bedroom was also offering a friendship. So she said, you know what? It's okay if you don't want to stay with me, but talk to me more often. Let me help you in some way. So I started talking to her more often, and I started telling her and opening up to her, because she was at this point my only friend that was not connected to my ex. He was just really the manager of my life, and everybody that I had connection with was through him. So I started talking to her, and I told her, you know what, I'm just like really afraid. I'm really afraid that one of these days he's going to actually deport me, or that he is going to throw me out of the window like he has said so many times. I am just simply afraid. And she said, Amy, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but the spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, Amy, at this point, what you need is Jesus. There's nothing that I can do for you if you don't accept my help, but at least come to church and find Jesus. So I was like, okay. I was always interested in God, or finding God in any way that I could. Growing up in Mexico, I was Catholic. So Catholicism was just very much different. I actually did try to get some help from church uh, in 2019, but they told me that if I was not married through a Catholic church, that they didn't even recognize my marriage, and that if I wanted to make it work, then I needed to get married to the Catholic church. So that didn't make any sense for me, and I just started to shy away from the Catholic church. But whenever my friend asked me to go to her church, which was a family church, I was like, okay, well, at least I know that you trust the people that are there. So let me give it a try. When I first stepped into that place, I was very embraced. Everybody was very welcoming, and I felt safe. I felt safe enough to cry and to be able to show my emotions, and to, not have to continue to put on that mask of fake happiness that I had to put on every time that I would go out with my husband. It was so relieving to know that I could be myself, and that they would accept me for myself. Once I started going to church, I just couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. I found so much grace, so much forgiveness, and just a lot of genuine love. A lot of the type of love that Jesus gives you, a lot of the type of love that God wants you to have. I started learning myself more through God and through the Bible, and I started just having a relationship with God. Because whenever I was a Catholic, the relationship that I had with the Bible was like I was reading a fable book. And this is not to say that Catholics are wrong in the way that they teach or whatever the case may be. It was just my experience. At the beginning of 2020, I continued to go to church and I would be there every Sunday. And every week, it would be just a little bit harder to be in a relationship with my husband. He wouldn't come to church with me. He wouldn't step a foot inside of that building, and he just didn't want to. I invited him many, many times, but the demons inside of him wouldn't let him. And I think that it's very important that I am also truthful and tell you that narcissism is a spirit. It is a spirit because there's no way that these people act the same. It is programmed to destroy other souls, especially the ones that are called to serve a bigger purpose. If you have a partner who is a narcissist, please know that you have a bigger purpose than just to be abused. That is not the purpose of your life. The purpose of every single one of us is to glorify God, and He gives us tools to do it. And the tools that He has given you are so big, they make hell nervous. And the devil wants to send you somebody that is sneaky enough to make you think that you are worthless and make you think that you don't have power to continue to glorify Jesus and continue to build on that kingdom. You have so much more than that. And I just want to say this as a previous victim, because I am not a victim anymore. I am not a victim anymore. Later on, I realized that whenever I would ask myself, like, why are we even still together? I would ask him things like, why is it that you love me? Like, why do you love me? Because in my mind, it just didn't make sense that you would love somebody and mistreat them. So he would look at me in the eye and would say, I love you because I see God in you. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a very good response. Thinking to myself, like, that sounds genuine. And I then asked myself, like, if you see God in me and if you love God, why don't you come to church with me? Well, the demons inside of him hate God. So the demons inside of your narcissist are going to hate you too, especially if he sees God in you. That was a revelation that I had. What happened in 2020 was very pivotal for my story because if you remember, I just couldn't leave. I didn't want to leave. The thing with the shelter, it fell through because I felt like something was telling me to stay. Whenever I spoke to the pastor of that church, I asked her of her thoughts on divorce, and she advised me to be the best wife that I could, even if he was a narcissist, even if he was abusive, and to be safe with it. That if the abuse was emotional, that I would go to the other room and cry and not let him see me cry, to try to overcome evil with good and to, be as soft and as feminine as I could be. So if he was to say something silly to me, I would say, that's okay. I would continue to make meals for him. And then I would go to my friend's house and cry there. And then we would exercise. We would cry and then we would exercise. So that was very beneficial for me because it would still allow me to release everything through Jesus. We would read a couple of scriptures and then we would exercise. So it was a very, very good balance. And I am very grateful that I had her through all of that process. So in March of 2020, we had COVID and everything shut down. Church shut down too. My job as a nanny shut down. I was only able to teach the girls that I used to take care of Spanish through online classes. So they were still paying me about half of what they used to pay me. And I just didn't have a steady income, but I had a house to stay on. And although I was being mistreated, I still had a roof over my head, which I'm grateful for. And the thing about grabbing onto God whenever things are so chaotic on the outside is that He will still find a way to provide, even if it doesn't make sense. Very randomly, I started receiving checks for crazy things. I received a big scholarship, so I didn't have to pay tuition, and it gave me some money too. I received a stimulus check, and I saved that. I received a check from a lawsuit that was a very big lawsuit, and I was not expecting to get more than $20 for that, but I received a good amount, and I was able to save all of that. So I was just so confused as how is it that I don't have a job, but I'm still receiving money? Weird, but that's how God moves. So even though the church was closed, I was still going to church, helping with production, helping with the cameras, and it kept me consistent in my walk. I kept on praying every day. I kept on going to Bible study as much as I could. I had a group of people that would do daily devotionals. So I started listening to them more. And I was able to just go through the whole spring and early summer of 2020 like that, keeping myself occupied. And not only that, but focusing on God, allowing Him to move His hand in my marriage, in my school, in my job. At some point, I was able to go back to work and we were able to go back to school. And in school, I made a couple of friends, but whenever I was so abused, I was so abused that even the smallest things would make me cry and they would make me have breakdowns in school. So the people that would notice and would care about what was going on became friends with me, and they would start asking me like, hey, what's going on? So I would have to tell them, well, I am married to a narcissist. He is making me very miserable and I love him. And that was very weird for me to say. I loved the guy that was making me miserable. I loved being with him, and he was still being very offensive in every way that he could. Anywho, by July of 2020, he was so fed up with me. He just couldn't take it anymore. He was really, really struggling to manipulate me. I was not letting him do it. I was not bothered by it. So he would continue to do things to poke at me or to make me feel flustered. He would say things out of nowhere to make me upset. Like he would say things about Mexico. He would say things about my family. He would say things about me, things that were very uncalled for, as long as he could bother me. But since I was not showing that I was bothered, it was bothering him more. So he told me that he just couldn't take it anymore and he wanted a divorce. And I agreed to it. And I let him know that I was not able to leave the house until I found an apartment. And it is very funny to me that he wanted me to leave, but in that same sentence, he would say things like, I bet you are not going to find an apartment. You're going to have to get a roommate because you're not going to be able to find one. And I am not saying this to be manipulative. I am saying this because I actually care about you, but I know that you're not going to be able to pay your bills without me. So I don't know what you're going to do. And you know what? To actually go and find an apartment was really hard. For me to have a nanny income that wasn't steady, landlords were just truly not believing in me. So I had about 3 applications that went to the drain because they were not accepting me. But God was still moving in my situation because before we bought a house, we were living in an apartment complex where the landlords were very personable. So they knew us. Well, I found an ad where there was an apartment, only one, only one. And it was opening in that complex where we used to live. So I called him, I set an appointment, I went to see the apartment, and with the amount of money that God was sending me on those random checks, I was able to pay for the security deposit in the first month and still have money left over to pay for my furniture. I had new furniture and I was still having money in my savings account. So that was just nothing but God. Nothing but God. Later on, the set of friends that I made through college all came to help me to pack up my stuff and go. And that was just a week after he asked me to leave. And mind you, he not only asked me to leave, he was also doing things so that I would leave. For example, he was throwing parties at the house while I was studying or while I was doing homework. And I would just start seeing people like coming in. And I was like, what is going on? And they would be like, hey, Amy, there's a party in your house. What is going on? So I would be like, what? There's a party in my house and I was not invited. This is not my house anymore, clearly. So once I left, I felt a lot of peace. And I could tell that God was really, really cautious with me because I was able to get a free lawyer for immigration, a free lawyer for divorce, and a free therapist. So throughout all of the spring of 2020, they were able to help me then overcome my case. They did not charge me a dime. Having a lawyer is very expensive, and you cannot tell me that that was not through God. And you know what? Had I left at the beginning of 2020 and taken that place at the shelter to later not have a steady income, I probably would have been homeless. I probably would have been in the streets. Just the amount of love that God showed through that process to me is really astonishing. I am not going to say that I was a perfect Christian because I was not. I am still a working piece. There's a lot of things in me that I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn how to cope and how to subject myself to abuse because I had to be fake to continue to be safe at a place where I was not wanted. So for me to get rid of that fakeness and become a genuine person and start working on my honesty and start working on accepting me for who I am and start just realizing that God chooses me first. Even when I was growing up, whenever I would have physical education class and we would have groups that do teams to play against each other, I was the last to be chosen. I was the last resort. And that's not how God makes me feel. He makes me feel like I'm his first. He makes me feel like he picks me. He makes me feel like even if I wander away, he comes looking for me and he pursues me. And that's so amazing. I know that there's somebody out there feeling the way that I did, feeling worthless, feeling hopeless, feeling like there's nothing left to live for. I used to have those thoughts too. I used to think that there was nothing left for me in this world. Like nobody that is around me cares about me really. I am just a nanny. And then with the things that my ex used to tell me, it would be even worse because I never thought that I would amount to do anything in life. And I just want to tell you, if you're having those thoughts, that's a lie from the enemy. That's a lie from the pits of hell. And it should go back to the pits of hell. You shouldn't accept it. That is a demonic attack in your life. And you don't have to take it. Whenever you start opening your Bible and you start realizing what God says about you, and you see how God's grace can change everything, you will start looking at life in a different light. God said that he's light in the darkness. I was in one of the darkest environments that I could be at, and he still came to shine on me. He still came to give me a light into my path and a lamp into my feet. And you know what? I am just going to take this moment to praise him for that because I just don't understand. I was horrible. I was a sinner. I did not deserve any of his glory, any of his mercy, and he still chose me. And I know that if you came across this video and if you're listening to this podcast, if you're having these thoughts, it's because he is telling you that he wants to choose you too. He wants you. He wants to have a relationship with you. And it's not like he needs us. He doesn't need us. We need him. But the moment you realize that you need him and that he's the one that has to be in control and you put everything in his hands, he will start working through your life in such a way that you cannot deny him. There is no way that I was here alone, with no job, and I was still provided for. God is so good. And you know what? I want to back it up with Bible. In Matthew 15:13, it says, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots." This means that whatever was in your garden that was not from him, he will come and uproot. Even if he has to leave that garden empty, he will put in new seeds so that they can surround you. But as long as it's things of him, that's what you want to have in there. He will prune you. There might be a season of isolation in your life after coming from an environment of such darkness. But you have to take away all of that darkness to finally be in the light. John 15:2 says, "He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful." Everything that he needs to cut off, he will cut off. After that relationship, I lost so many friends. I lost all of the connections that I have made, but I had to cut off everything. He had to cut off everything so that I would be in a place where I could actually grow. Another one is Ezekiel 34:12. "As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness." If that is not grace, I don't know what it is. He said that he's going to leave the 99 sheep to come and find you. Out of the clouds and darkness, he is going to come and find you. And one thing that I want to make very clear about my testimony is that even after I was able to find an apartment, to get new friends, and to find a better place for me, God was still working in me. He made sure that that process of sanctification was taken care of. There were many times where I was about to backslide and he would send something to me. He would send a friend to me. He would pull me back so that I would be focused on his way and not my own. He said, "Lean not onto your own understanding, but seek me." And he said, "His peace will surpass all understanding." God is not only there for our moments of struggle, he is also there for our moments of celebration. He is also there on our daily lives. He never leaves us nor forsake us. So don't leave him either. You know, another thing that was very important for me and that really changed the way that I saw things was just opening the Bible for myself and understanding it for myself. There's a lot of times, especially in the new stages of Christianism, where you're going to need others to explain to you what the Bible says, because it's really difficult to digest. It's like a new baby. You have to drink only milk. And then when you're a toddler, you can eat certain vegetables, fruits. And then when you're an adult, you can process meat. It's the same thing with the Bible. It goes through stages. Read the Gospels first, then seek counsel, seek a mentor. If you see somebody in church that you can learn from, talk to them and ask them if you can go to Bible study with them. Try to participate in it so that you can have a community to lean on. And you know about my life now, well, the enemy might tell you that there's no hope for you, that there's no opportunities for you, that you would never make that it's in your dreams, that there's just crazy ideas in your mind, and that there's no way that you're ever going to do that. And let me tell you, my ex used to tell me that I was always going to be a nanny. And right now I work at corporate America at a good job. I am in a God-centered relationship where I feel very loved. My future husband loves me like Christ loves the church. And God is just so amazing. So if you have been in a situation like I was, please know that there is hope. There is a lot of hope for you. In Jeremiah 29:11, God says that he has plans for us, plans for the future, to not suffer and to give us hope. The Lord says that he's going to take care of you if you let him fight your battles. Don't think that just because the enemy put an attack on you, that he is better than God or that he is stronger than God. There's no way that he's going to win that battle unless you let him. If I would have let the devil dictate my life, trust me, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I feel better than ever. I am a Holy Spirit-filled person that truly has God in her. I am harvesting the fruits of the Spirit in my life. I just have joy for everything. I never ever feel like I'm alone. And I want you to feel the same way. I want you to know Christ for yourself. I want you to have that relationship with him where you truly feel like he loves you. He wants to be with you. And if there's something that he can do for you, is everything. God plus nothing equals everything. He can do everything for you. I hope that this episode was uplifting, encouraging, and filled of hope for you. If you have a testimony yourself, please feel free to contact me and share with me. I would love to highlight your story. Please remember that every time the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy in our lives is because you're already rich. Have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to share with someone who would enjoy this podcast. I hope this episode helped you feel more confident in your journey. Please remember that even the darkest days have their heavenly purpose.